There comes a moment in a woman's life when something breaks, but it's not her. It's the silence. It's the chain. It's the old identity wrapped around pain that no longer fits. Maybe you know this moment. Maybe you've felt it in the middle of a quiet night, sitting on the edge of a bed that once held hope. Maybe you've whispered enough, not out of anger, but from exhaustion. Not to him, but to yourself. And in that whisper, something began to wake up. For so long, you gave more than you had. You loved deeply, hoping he would see your heart. You stayed quiet, thinking that your patience would make him stay. You carried the weight of a love that asked too much and gave too little. And you told yourself, maybe if I wait a little longer, maybe if I change just a bit more. But the truth is, you were slowly disappearing. You were becoming invisible even to yourself. And no one saw the quiet unraveling of your soul. There's a kind of tiredness that doesn't come from work. It comes from begging to be seen, from bending until you break, from standing in front of someone, emotionally naked, and still feeling like you were too much, or not enough. That's the exhaustion I'm talking about. The kind that doesn't just live in the mind. It settles in the body. It lives in your chest, your shoulders, your sleep. You know this tiredness, don't you? And yet, inside that tiredness, there was a desire. A small, burning desire not just to be respected, but to respect yourself again. To look in the mirror and recognize the woman staring back. To feel that your presence alone, without performance, without proof, without pleasing, is already enough. That you are enough. Louise Hay once said, "I am willing to let go. I deserve to be free." And that freedom begins the moment you say enough. Not just to him, not to the past, but to the voice inside that believed pain was your destiny. That love meant waiting in silence. That your worth was tied to being chosen. But what if the act of saying enough isn't the end? What if it's the beginning? The moment the soul speaks louder than fear. Lise Bourbeau teaches that many of our patterns, our tolerance, our silence, our endless hope, are rooted in deep wounds of rejection and abandonment. And when we say enough, we're not being cold, we're healing. We're finally choosing not to pay the price of love with self-erasure. There's a powerful image that comes to mind. A woman walking barefoot for miles, bleeding on sharp stones, and she does it not because she enjoys pain, but because she thinks it proves her love. Until one day, she stops. She looks at her feet, and she decides to wear her own shoes, to walk for herself. That's what enough means. Not giving up on love, but giving up on pain as proof of love. And so this story begins, not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with the quiet, sacred decision to return to yourself. This is the story of what awakens in a woman's heart, the moment she stops asking to be chosen, and chooses herself. This is where your self-love begins to bloom, not in the light, but in the moment you dared to leave the dark. Let's walk together from here. There's a quiet ache that comes from being loyal to someone who was never loyal to you. It's not loud. It doesn't scream. It settles in like fog, slowly, invisibly, until you can't see yourself anymore. You keep showing up. You keep believing. You keep forgiving. Not because you don't see the truth, but because your heart still remembers the moments that once felt real. And in that remembering, you betray yourself a little more each time. She gave second chances, not because he deserved them, but because she needed to believe that love could be salvaged. That loyalty would somehow be enough to fix what was breaking. And so, she stayed. She stayed when he was distant. She stayed when he forgot her birthday. She stayed when her soul screamed to leave, not because she was weak, but because her love was strong. Too strong, perhaps, for someone who didn't know how to receive it. But love that asks you to betray your own heart isn't love. It's a lesson. And loyalty that comes at the cost of your self-worth isn't loyalty. It's a slow goodbye to your own soul. Saying enough doesn't mean you didn't love. It means you finally realize that real love would never ask you to shrink. There's a moment, often subtle, often quiet, when the heart can't carry the weight anymore. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring for yourself. The heart begins to understand that love without presence, without effort, without honesty, is a ghost. And you can't build a future with a ghost. What Louise Hay would gently remind you is this: I am willing to release the pattern in me that created this. And that pattern often starts with giving more than you receive, with hoping longer than is healthy, with mistaking emotional hunger for love. But patterns can be broken. Cycles can be ended. Especially when a woman starts to see that her loyalty must first belong to herself. So, if you've been loyal to someone who only showed up in pieces, this chapter is for you. not to judge your loyalty, but to honor your awakening, because something inside you has already whispered, there must be more than this. And there is. There always was. You just needed to remember. Let's talk now about a quieter form of self-abandonment, one that hides beneath what we call understanding. She told herself she was being patient, that love takes time, that all relationships have seasons of waiting, and so she waited. She softened her voice. She held back her needs. She gave him space, even when what she truly needed was to be held, to be seen, to be chosen. But what she called patience was something else. It was fear, a fear so deep it disguised itself as virtue, a fear of abandonment, a fear of being alone, a fear that if she asked for too much, she would lose what little she had. This is the silent self-betrayal hidden in being understanding. It's the moment you begin to explain his absence, to justify his coldness, to make excuses for his inconsistency, not because you don't see it, but because you're afraid that if you don't accept crumbs, you'll end up with nothing. And so, you lower your voice, you stretch your heart, you swallow your intuition, again and again. But somewhere inside, your soul knows. It knows that love should not hurt this much, that being understanding does not mean forgetting yourself, that being patient should never mean being invisible. Louise Hay would say, I now discover how wonderful I am. I choose to love and enjoy myself. These words are not just affirmations. They are medicine for the soul of the woman who has spent too long making herself small in order to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. There is a cost to this kind of silence, a spiritual weight that builds up over time. You begin to feel tired, but not just physically, emotionally, psychologically. Your body starts to ache in places your voice never reached. You may smile on the outside, but inside, you're holding your breath. And somewhere along the way, you stop asking for what you need, because asking has become too painful, too dangerous, too disappointing. But here's the truth that waits beneath the silence. You are not too much. Your needs are not a burden. Your longing for emotional presence is not weakness. It is your soul asking for alignment, for truth, for love that doesn't require you to disappear in order to keep it. So when you finally whisper, enough, it's not the end of your love. It's the beginning of your self-respect. Because being understanding without being understood is not love. It's a slow death of your spirit. And yet, what follows that whisper is not always easy. There is a sacred moment ahead, one that doesn't come with fanfare or applause, but with quiet dignity. Let's talk about that moment next. The moment when enough becomes a sacred act of return. There comes a moment when enough is no longer spoken with anger, but with grace. It doesn't come with shouting or slamming doors. It comes in silence, the kind of silence that feels like truth, like clarity, like coming home. Saying enough is not an act of rebellion. It is a return to yourself, to the woman you used to be before the world taught you that being loved meant being less. This moment is sacred. It's not loud, but it is powerful. It doesn't seek revenge. It seeks restoration. It's the moment when you stop chasing and start remembering your worth, remembering your softness, remembering that love should never cost you your voice, your joy, your peace. For many women, this turning point feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. Behind you, years of waiting, hoping, explaining. In front of you, the unknown. And yet, your heart knows. It knows that staying would mean more of the same, more silence, more shrinking, more nights wondering what else you could do to be enough. But the truth is, you were always enough. You just forgot while you were trying to be chosen. Louise Hay spoke of returning to the self as the foundation of all healing. I love and approve of myself. Simple words, radical truth. When a woman says enough from this place, she is not walking away. She is walking back. Back to the little girl who used to dream. Back to the teenager who believed she was magic. Back to the woman who knows her heart is a sacred space, not a testing ground. There is beauty in this return. A beauty that is not polished or perfect, but raw, honest, alive. You might still feel shaky. You might still cry. You might still miss him. But none of that means you made the wrong choice. It means you made the right one, for you. And so, in the quiet aftermath of enough, something shifts. You start to breathe differently. You sleep deeper. You feel the space inside you clearing. And for the first time in a long time, you sense the presence of someone you almost lost. Yourself. But what happens when the pain of tolerating too much starts to live in the body? When the emotional weight becomes physical? Let's move gently into that next. Because sometimes it's not your heart that speaks, it's your body. There are wounds the body remembers long after the heart has tried to forget. You may think you've moved on. You may believe you've processed it all. But your body holds truths that the mind has pushed aside. The headaches that come out of nowhere. The tightness in your chest that visits each night. The insomnia that lingers even when you feel emotionally calm. These are not random. They are messages. Your body speaks the language of the soul, especially when the soul has been silent for too long. Lise Bourbeau reminds us that the body reveals what the spirit cannot yet voice. When you tolerated too much, your nervous system carried the weight. When you said yes, while your intuition said no, your gut felt the betrayal. When you held back tears to seem strong, your shoulders bore the cost. Emotional pain, when ignored, finds its way into the tissues, into the muscles, into the breath. The body remembers everything, especially the things you told yourself didn't matter. And so, when a woman finally says enough, something begins to shift, not just emotionally, but physically. Her breath deepens. Her sleep begins to return. Her appetite for life slowly reawakens. It's as if the cells of her body are exhaling after years of tension. Because even when her words were silent, her body was screaming. You may have felt this, the moment when your body started to protest, when the migraines became more frequent, when your chest felt heavy for no clear reason, when your stomach clenched at the sound of his name. These were never just symptoms. They were signs. Signs that you were not at peace. Signs that you were living in emotional conflict, caught between love and self-abandonment. Louise Hay taught us to listen to the body with love, not with fear, not with shame, but with compassion. My body is a mirror of my inner thoughts and beliefs, she said. And when you begin to change your inner world, your body responds. When you say enough and truly mean it, your body feels safer, lighter, heard. There is a healing that begins when a woman reclaims not only her heart, but her body. When she no longer tolerates love that makes her sick. When she stops calling stress normal. When she gives herself permission to feel, to rest, to heal. Because true healing isn't just emotional. It's cellular. It's embodied. It's sacred. Now imagine the woman who is afraid to walk away. Not because she doesn't know the truth, but because the unknown still scares her more than the pain she's been holding. What would Louise Hay say to her? Let's find out. To the woman who is afraid to walk away, not because she doesn't know she should, but because she doesn't know who she will be without him, Louise Hay would speak gently, but clearly. She would say, "You've already survived the worst, the lack of love while staying." These are not just comforting words. They are a revelation, a remembering, a sacred truth we often forget while clinging to what hurts us. You see, staying in a place where you are unseen, unheard, or unloved is not safety. It is familiarity. And familiarity can feel like love when you've spent years confusing comfort with care. But real safety, the kind that nourishes the soul, only exists in spaces where you are free to be whole, where your voice is welcomed, not silenced, where your softness is celebrated, not manipulated. The unknown is frightening, that's true, but staying in what is known, when that known is a place of emotional starvation, is even more frightening. Because every day you stay, you lose tiny pieces of yourself. Pieces that carry your joy, your dreams, your light, and eventually, you start to wonder if those parts were ever real. But they were. They still are. They're just waiting for you to come home. Fear is a natural part of leaving. It comes in waves. It whispers doubts. It tempts you with nostalgia. But it's not a sign you're making the wrong decision. It's a sign you're growing. That you're stepping outside the cage you were never meant to live in. Louise Hay would remind you that love is not supposed to hurt, confuse, or deplete you, and that walking away is not failure, it's freedom. Your silence was never peace, it was survival. Your tolerance was not maturity, it was conditioning. And now the woman within you is awakening. She no longer wants to survive, she wants to live, fully, freely, fiercely. And as you take each step forward, even if your legs shake, even if your voice trembles, you are not walking away from love, you are walking toward it. Toward the love you give yourself, toward the life that honors your worth, toward the sacred stillness where your soul can finally exhale. But as you move into this healing, there's often a voice inside that says, if I set boundaries, will I push people away? Will they call me selfish? Let's soften into that next. Because there's a myth about boundaries that needs to be gently unraveled. There's a quiet shame that often follows the word boundary, as if saying no means you've failed someone, as if protecting your peace is an act of harm. Many women carry the belief that setting limits is selfish, that being a good partner, a good mother, a good woman, means being endlessly available, endlessly forgiving, endlessly open. But this isn't love. This is depletion, wrapped in devotion. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors. They are the sacred thresholds that say, I will meet you here, in mutual respect. Beyond this line, I lose myself, and I won't do that anymore. A boundary is not a rejection of others. It's a remembrance of self. It's the moment a woman realizes that love without self-respect is not sustainable, that care without containment is chaos. You may have been told, directly or silently, that your worth came from what you gave, that your value was measured by your availability, your sacrifice, your silence. But that version of love is not real. It's conditioning. And when you begin to dismantle that, it can feel radical. It can feel lonely. But it is the first true act of self-loyalty. The fear of being called selfish is real, especially for women who were raised to nurture, to fix, to hold everything together. But there's nothing selfish about choosing peace over chaos, about choosing presence over performance. Louise Hay would say, I stand on my own 2 feet. I claim my power. And claiming your power often means redefining what love looks like, not as something you earn by overgiving, but something you honor by self-respecting. Setting a boundary doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you stop abandoning yourself in the name of love. And as you do that, something beautiful happens. You start to feel more clear, more grounded, more whole. The people who truly love you, who see you, who respect you, will stay. The ones who only stayed because you had no boundaries will leave. And that, too, is love clearing space. What comes after boundaries, however, is not always immediate relief. Sometimes what comes next is guilt, a soft, lingering guilt that questions your strength. Let's move into that now, the moment when guilt fades and healing begins. At first, it feels like guilt, a quiet ache in your chest, a voice that whispers, did I do the right thing? It's the part of you still attached to pleasing, still afraid of being misunderstood, still tender from years of putting others first. Guilt arrives not because you did something wrong, but because you finally did something right for yourself. And that, for a woman conditioned to equate love with sacrifice, feels unnatural. This is the first sign of healing, when guilt visits, but no longer stays. When it shows up, but you don't invite it in. You begin to see it for what it truly is, not a moral compass, but an echo of old programming. The belief that choosing yourself is betrayal, that happiness without permission is rebellion, that peace is only allowed when others approve. But then, something shifts. A quiet peace begins to rise. At first it comes in brief moments. A morning when you wake without anxiety. An afternoon when you catch yourself smiling for no reason. An evening where silence feels soft, not scary. And then one day, without fanfare, it happens. A smile. Small. Sincere. Yours. Not given. Not performed. Just there. Because you're beginning to feel whole again. Louise Hay would remind you, I am at peace with my past. I am loving the present and looking forward to the future. These are not just affirmations. They are milestones. Signs that the storm inside is settling, that the inner critic is growing quieter. That guilt is no longer your guide. Love is. Real love. From you. For you. Healing is not always loud. Sometimes it's the softest voice inside that says, I didn't deserve what happened, but I do deserve to be happy now. And the more you listen to that voice, the more grounded you become, the more at home you feel in your own body, your own choices, your own life. And from that place, not of certainty, but of courage, you stop needing to explain yourself, to justify your healing, to prove your worth, because true healing comes with a new kind of power. The power of quiet confidence, of sacred inner knowing. Let's move into that space now. The emotional power of no longer explaining who you are. There was a time when she explained everything, every choice, every pause, every boundary. She softened her no with apologies. She dressed her needs in careful language, afraid they might sound like demands. She over-explained her silence, her distance, her pain, not to be understood, but to avoid rejection, to keep the peace, to stay acceptable, to prove she wasn't too much. But with healing comes a shift, a quiet unraveling of the need to justify, a soft surrender to what is true without permission. She begins to see that her worth is not up for debate, that her boundaries are not offenses, they are sacred, that her voice doesn't need to be packaged in approval. And in that space, something powerful happens. She stops explaining, not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. Because when you know who you are, you don't need to convince anyone. When you've spent years defending your feelings, and you finally feel safe in your own truth, silence becomes a sanctuary. Not the kind of silence that hides pain, but the kind that holds peace. A mature, steady silence that says, I don't need you to agree. I just need to be in alignment with myself. Louise Hay would affirm this moment as one of spiritual alignment. I am safe in the universe, and all life loves and supports me. And when you live from that place, from the safety of inner validation, you no longer seek external approval to make your truth feel real. There's an emotional liberation in no longer explaining yourself, in choosing your well-being over someone's misunderstanding, in knowing that being misunderstood is not your burden to carry. It's simply a reflection of where someone else is on their path, not a reflection of your worth. And the beauty of this space is that it opens room for authenticity, for honest connections, for relationships where explanations aren't needed because presence speaks louder, where you're not constantly translating your heart to be received, you're simply being. And after all the storms, after all the unraveling, this silence feels different. It's not heavy, it's not empty, it's sacred. And in this sacred silence, something else begins to rise, the still voice of your soul, whispering a truth you had long forgotten. Let's move now into that final moment, the silence that follows the storm. There is a sacred silence that follows the storm, not the silence of repression, not the silence of abandonment, but the silence of arrival, the kind of quiet that lives after the tears have dried and the begging has stopped, after the door has been gently closed and your hands are no longer reaching. It's not empty, it's full of echoes, of wisdom, of space. At first it may feel strange, even lonely. You've been so used to the noise, the tension, the waiting, the wondering. You've danced with uncertainty for so long, this stillness can feel like absence. But stay with it, breathe with it, because in that silence, something begins to speak, not from the outside, but from within. It is your soul, the one you hushed for years, the one that whispered through your dreams, through your aches, through your longings. And now she speaks clearly. She says, thank you for coming back. Thank you for choosing yourself. Thank you for not abandoning me again. Thank you for finally listening. This is the moment when everything changes, not because the world outside shifted, but because the world within you realigned. You are not the same woman who begged to be chosen. You are not the same heart that waited for breadcrumbs. You have become something else, someone else, a woman who is whole, a woman who walks with herself. Clarissa Pinkola Estes would call this the howl of the wild woman, not a scream of rage but a song of return, a declaration that you will no longer live domesticated, that you were not made to shrink, to bend, to disappear. You were made to feel, to love, to choose, and most of all, to live free. Louise Hay reminds us, I am willing to change. I am willing to release the need to be unworthy. This is the most radical shift, the understanding that your self-worth was never missing, only buried. And now, as you stand in this new place, you realize it wasn't just a boundary with him. It was a promise to yourself, a vow to never abandon your own heart again, like a dry land that finally receives rain, like a desert that blooms overnight. Your soul begins to flourish, because you stopped asking for love in places that couldn't give it, and you started offering love to the one who always needed it most, you. If this message spoke to a part of your heart that is still healing, I invite you to subscribe and stay close to this space. You're not alone on this journey, and if you're ready to keep walking this path of self-love and spiritual awakening, click on the video that just appeared on your screen. It holds the next piece of your healing. And I'll be right there with you. Keep listening. Keep feeling. You are home now.